Hello, Cindy here. I'm back to read another story for my grandchildren and all children out there that would like to listen. And the story I'd like to read tonight is called Puss in Boots, which some of you may have seen a video about Puss in Boots, but this is the old-fashioned version of the story. And I found it through looking in a book called The Old-Fashioned Storybook by and it's a collection of stories, and it is illustrated by Troy Allen Howell. Okay, Puss in Boots. There was a miller who, when he died, left no more estate to his 3 sons than his mill, his donkey, and his cat. The eldest had the mill, the second the donkey, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The poor young fellow was quite comfortless at having so poor a lot. My brothers, said he, may get their living handsomely enough by joining their possessions together. But for my part, when I have eaten up my cat and made me a muff of his skin, I must die of hunger. Monsieur Puss, the cat, heard all this, but made as if he did not. He said to his son, with a grave and serious air, "Do not thus worry, my good master. You have nothing else to do but give me a bag and have a pair of boots made for me, so that I may scamper through the dirt and the brambles. Then you shall see that you have not so bad a portion as you imagine." Wonder what he's got in mind. The Puss's master did not build very much upon what the cat said, though. He had, however, often seen him play a great many cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, as when he used to hang by his heels or hide himself in the meal, making as if he were dead. So he thought it wise to allow Puss to try to alter his miserable condition. When Puss had what he asked for, he gallantly put on his boots on his feet and his bag about his neck. And with strings of the bag in his 2 forepaws, he went into the warren, where was great abundance of rabbits. He put bran and sow thistle into his bag and stretched out at length, as if he were dead. There he waited for some young rabbits, not yet acquainted with his wicked ways of the world, to come and rummage his bag for what he had put into it. Tricky. No sooner had he lain down than he had what he wanted. A rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into his bag, and Monsieur Puss, immediately drawing close the strings, took and killed him without pity. Proud of his prey, he went into the palace and asked to speak with his majesty. He was shown upstairs into the king's apartment. Bowing low, he said to him, "I have brought you, sir, a rabbit of the warren, which my noble lord, the Marquis of Carabas," for that was the title Puss was pleased to give his master, "has commanded me to present to your majesty from him." "Tell thy master," said the king, "that I thank him, and that he does me a great deal of pleasure." Another time Puss hid himself among the standing corn, holding his bag open, and when 2 partridges ran into it, he drew the strings and so caught them both. He went and made a present of these to the king, as he had done before with the rabbit that he had caught in the warren. The king, in like manner, received the partridges with great pleasure, and even gave him some money. For 2 or 3 months, Puss continued to carry to his Majesty from time to time game that he caught in his bag. One day in particular, Puss discovered that the king was to ride in his coach along the river with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world. So Puss said to his master, "If you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. You have nothing else to do but to go and wash yourself in the river in that part I shall show you, and leave the rest to me." The Marquis of Carabas did what Puss advised without knowing why or wherefore. While he was washing, the king passed by, and Puss cried out, "Help! Help! My lord, the Marquis of Carabas is drowning!" At this noise, the king put his head out of the coach window, and seeing the cat, who had often brought him such good game, he commanded his guards to run immediately to the assistance of his lordship, the Marquis of Carabas. While they were drawing the poor Marquis out of the river, Puss came up to the coach. He told the king that while his master was washing, there came by some rogues who went off with his clothes, and the robbers had not been caught, even though his master had cried out, "Thieves, thieves," several times, as loud as he could. This cunning cat had hidden the clothes under a great stone. The king immediately commanded the officers of his wardrobe to run and fetch one of his best suits for the Marquis of Carabas. The fine clothes the king gave the Marquis of Carabas set off the Marquis's good looks, for he was well made and very handsome. The king's daughter took a secret inclination to him, and the Marquis of Carabas had no sooner cast 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances than she fell madly in love with him. The king requested that the Marquis come into the coach and join them in their ride. Puss, quite overjoyed to see his project begin to succeed, marched on ahead of the coach. He came upon some countrymen who were mowing in the meadow, and he said to them, "Good people, you who are mowing, if you do not tell the king that the meadow you mow belongs to my lord, the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king did not fail to ask the mowers to whom the meadow they were mowing belonged. "To my lord, the Marquis of Carabas," answered they all together, for Puss's threats had made them terribly afraid. Puss, who went on still ahead of the coach, met with some reapers and said to them, "Good people, you who are reaping, if you do not tell the king that all the corn belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king, who passed by a moment after, asked to whom all that corn did belong. "To my lord, the Marquis of Carabas," replied the reapers, and the king was very well pleased with it, as well as with the Marquis, whom he congratulated thereupon. The cat, who went always ahead of the coach, said the same words to all he met, and the king was astonished at the vast estates of the Marquis of Carabas. Monsieur Puss came at last to a stately castle, the master of which was an ogre who was the richest being in the world had known. Truly, all the lands that the king had just gone over belonged to this ogre. Puss, who had taken care to inform himself who the ogre was and what he was capable of doing, asked to speak with him, saying he could not pass so near a castle without having the honor of paying his respects to the ogre. The ogre received him as politely as an ogre could do, and he made him sit down. I have been assured, said Puss, that you have the gift of being able to change yourself into any sort of creature you have a mind to. You can, for example, transform yourself into a lion, an elephant, and the like. Well, that is true, answered the ogre very briskly, and to convince you, you shall now see me become a lion. Puss was so terrified at the sight of the lion near him that he immediately got into the gutter because of his boots, which were no use at all to him walking upon the tiles. A little while after, when the Puss saw that the ogre had resumed his natural form, he came down and admitted he had been very much frightened. I have been moreover informed, said Puss, but I know that this not how to believe it, that you have also the power to take on you the shape of the smallest animals. For example, that you could change yourself into a rat or a mouse. But I must own to you, I take this to be impossible. Impossible? Cried the ogre. You shall see to that presently. And at the same time he changed himself into a mouse and began to run about the floor. Puss no sooner perceived this than he fell upon him and ate him up. Meanwhile, as the king passed this fine castle of the ogre, he had a mind to go into it. Puss, who had heard the noise of his majesty's coach running over the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king, Your Majesty is welcome in this castle of my lord, the Marquis of Carabas. What? Marquis, cried the king, does this castle also belong to you? There can be nothing finer than this court and all the stately buildings that surround it. Let us go into it, if you please. The Marquis gave his hand to the princess and followed the king, who went first. They passed into the spacious hall, where they found the magnificent supper that the ogre had prepared for his friends, who dared not enter the castle now, knowing the king was there. His Majesty was perfectly charmed with the good quality of the Marquis of Carabas, as was his daughter, who, as we have seen, had fallen in love with him. Having seen the vast estate the Marquis had possessed, the king said to him, after having drunk 5 or 6 glasses of wine, It will be owing to yourself only if you are not my son-in-law. The Marquis, making several low bows, accepted the honor that his Majesty had offered him, and forthwith that very next day he married the princess. Puss became a great lord, and he never ran after mice any more, except for sport. I hope you enjoyed that story. It was called Puss in Boots. I stopped this thing. I hope you have a very good night.